Yeah, good. It's early for you, but it's late for us, and that's all good.
What time is it?
5:30 p.m.
Okay.
It's dark outside. It's very Christmassy, and the lights are on, and that's all good. So a couple of quick things. This is going to splice in with your excerpt on the Global Classroom, so we'll be putting it together. I think Mr. Chapman has got a number of pupils here that will talk live, and then some questions that we read to you as well as we go from there. It shouldn't take too long. We're delighted to have you back with us and taking time. Your session was really well received globally as well, which is fantastic, and we love that. On the Teams software, we clocked over 2.4 million views of the actual live stream, which is really good, really good. And of course, post that, we'll get some on YouTube as well. And Twitter impressions were 14 million across Instagram and Twitter as well, which is nice to see. So, and that was all down to you, Michael. Clearly, the Olaf drawing was a major thing that pulled that. No, it was great. We'd love to have you guys involved again, and your team have been fantastic. And if we get opportunity, Michael, to involve you in perhaps doing a live session with a bit more time than 12 minutes in 2021, we'd love to do that as well, if that's okay with you at some point.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Great. So we'll look at that, and that'd be fantastic. And I did have a go at drawing Olaf, by the way. I did really try that, and quite a few of our guests did as well. So we're going to record this session. It shouldn't take too long to splice in there, and I'll hand over to Mr. Chapman, who'll then probably have a chat to you first of all, Michael, about a bit about who you are, and rather than reading out your fairly detailed, fantastic sort of blurb about yourself, he'll ask you to explain a bit about yourself. I'll tune out because nobody wants to see me. They see enough of me anyway. And then we'll go bit by bit. If anything goes wrong and somebody wants to repeat a question, Mr. Chapman, that's fine. We can do that. And again, we'll slice these things in as we go from there, as we work through. They're all really excited, and they should enjoy that. So good luck to you all, and I'll say hello at the end of it as well when we speak. So, Mr. Chapman, we are recording, so over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Michael, for agreeing to come and do a Q&A for us. We've got lots of students very excited to speak to you, which is fantastic. We've got some students who are going to kind of present questions to you, and we've also asked some students who weren't able to attend to write their questions down. If you don't mind, we'd also put those questions to you. The first thing I'd like to speak to you about is just a little bit about maybe how you ended up working for Disney, a little bit about your career so far, and perhaps some of kind of the background to your story of how you've ended up working on some of the films that you've worked on. So I don't know if you could start us off a little bit with maybe where you studied or how you got into animation, and how you ended up kind of in the job that you're in now.
Sure. When I was a child, I grew up in Central Florida, right next to Disney World. So my family had season passes to the parks, and we would go every weekend. And there was this park that they had. Now it's called Disney Hollywood Studios, but at the time it was Disney's MGM Studios. And they had a tour where you could actually watch animated films being made. And my parents would just drop me off and let me watch all these animators draw and work on these characters all day. And so I just had this love of animation instilled in me from then. So my family was really supportive of that and helped me pursue it. And I went to the University of Central Florida, which was in Orlando, and there was an animation program started by some of the Disney animators who worked in Orlando, and I studied there for 4 years, and then moved out to Los Angeles, and was like, I'm here, and they're like, well, you still need to learn more. So I found a great job at a studio called Rhythm and Hues doing technical animation. So it was like hair and cloth simulation. And that would go on top of people that animated the characters, the actual acting and performance. But I really wanted to do character animation, so I continued going to school, and I went to a school called Animation Mentor, which is an online animation school taught by currently working professionals. And then I went to another school that was more of an in-person class called Animation Collaborative, right across the street from Pixar, taught by some Pixar animators. And ultimately, it was the work that I did in that school that I used to apply to work at Disney, and I got in. This is like the 4th time that I applied at Disney, so finally got in with this one at when they were making Wreck-It Ralph, the first Wreck-It Ralph in 2012, and I got in as a background crowds animator, which they call an assistant animator. So that's like all, if you remember the movie, it's all the candies cheering in the background and all that sort of stuff. And it was a great way to learn and slowly roll into the production of the studio, and I've been there ever since. So I've worked on Frozen, Big Hero 6, Zootopia, Moana. I didn't work on Wreck-It Ralph 2 because I was at the time working on Frozen 2, as a supervisor. And now I can say it, they've announced it. I'm working on Encanto, which is coming out in 2021.
Wow. Yeah, thank you very much. That's fascinating. One of the things I just pick up a little bit there, you said it was you applied to Disney 4 times. I mean, there must be a lot of perseverance from your end, and it sounds like you had some fantastic teachers along the way that really helped your career.
I did. The first time I applied, it was just like I didn't know what they were looking for, and I actually was able to go to a few animation conferences here in Los Angeles who were hosted by different studios. And one of the studios was Disney, and they would actually have professional animators, look at your work and let you know specifically in your work what you need to work on and how that will help you get into Disney. So I met with an animator named Doug Bennett, who I work with now, and he was like, these are the specific things you need to focus on. It was great, so I could take those forward and carry them through. And they were the kind of things that you know from Disney movies, which is like, we want your characters to be believable. We want them to do things that are relatable, but sort of feel fresh and new, so it doesn't feel like an old recycled trick. And I think Disney's great at making really authentic, fresh performances. So being able to talk to Doug at that conference and then push forward with that advice was super helpful.
Fantastic. And just before we move on to some of the questions from our students, I was doing a little bit of research earlier, and one of the things I picked up on when you were working perhaps with Frozen was that you worked with some of the top Broadway stars to exchange ideas about how to mix kind of music and animation together. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit more on that for us?
Sure. This is probably one of my favorite things that we got to do. When we were working on even Moana, we were studying musical performances and trying to enhance how our characters breathe and how they feel the emotions of our characters. And so the voice actress and actors will sing the parts, and then our job as animators is to make the Disney characters feel like they're the ones who are singing and they're the ones who are talking and thinking. So we drew a lot of inspiration from Broadway performers. And in Frozen, we actually brought in a few of them. So we brought in Jessie Mueller, who is a Broadway legend. She's a star. She's one of our favorites. And she introduced us to her friend Keala Settle, who if you might know her from The Greatest Showman. She was the bearded lady. So she came in with Jessie, and they hosted two different singing master classes. And they also brought in a musical director named Doug Peck, who they both work with. And he later taught voice lessons. I took some voice lessons with him too, because as animators, our job is to make it feel believable. And the best way to do that is to get up and do it yourself. And so I was like, I need to take some singing classes so I know, like, what does singing actually feel like? What does it look like? And where am I breathing from? And how is it to hold this vowel? Those sorts of things. So it was a fascinating time. I feel like the animation crew had a lot of fun. Every film offers a unique challenge. So we're always ready to dive in and explore that. So musical exploration was a huge part of Frozen 2.
Fantastic. This is our students are going to find this so interesting. So I do thank you for coming along. And we're going to move on to the section now where I'm going to invite some of our students to ask you questions. Our first student is a year 10 student, Alicia. So if Alicia is able to kind of unmute and turn her camera on, and then she can ask you the first question. So hopefully Alicia can hear us and is here and ready to start.
Hello.
Hi, Alicia. Lovely. We can hear you. Can you ask your question?
Perfect. At what age did you first decide that you wanted to take art seriously, and what advice would you give someone interested in art?
I have a picture to show you. I don't know that my brothers approve of this picture. I'm sure they do. When I was a kid, I used to go to this animation tour, and this is, if you can see it, this is me in the middle in the green. Both of my brothers turned out to be athletes, and the one in the green did not, which makes sense. But this is the animation tour that I was talking about. And I think in this photo, I must be like 5 or 6. And once I took that tour, I saw adults who were focused on drawing and focused on story. And I was like, I didn't realize that was, I love cartoons, but I didn't know that I could make them. So I really started pursuing it even then. So much so that we got a list of schools from that tour of different colleges who accept art programs. And I think I was 12 at the time, and I started getting calls from, not because they had seen my artwork, but just because I expressed interest. I was getting calls from all these art schools saying, we'd love to interview Michael. for application for next year. And my mom was like, he's 12, we'll talk later. So even then I was really serious about it. In high school, I adapted my focus to include theater and photography, choir, those sorts of things that help not necessarily directly influence animation, but are all inclusive, because animation is probably the most collaborative, most inclusive art form, because you're involved in learning so many different things to make your performance make sense, and you're building it together. So even though I was focused on that during high school, I feel like that fed into when I eventually went to college and was like, let's do this. So probably mostly when I was a kid, and then a little break in high school, but learning valuable things, and then going back in college and pushing forward. And I would say I graduated in 2008 from college, and I got hired at Disney in 2012. So it was about 4 years after college of still learning, still pushing, still trying. And then getting into Disney, 8 years ago, I'm still pushing, still learning, still trying. So it never ends, but it's worth it. It's fun, because if you're constantly looking for something new to push towards, this is it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that idea of kind of continuously pushing and continuously learning is something all of our students could really learn from. So thank you. And thank you, Alicia, for your question. I'm going to move on to our second question now, which is from Jacob Lanigan, one of our Year 13 students. Jacob, if you're able to unmute and turn your camera on if possible, so you can ask your question to Michael.
Hello.
Lovely. Thank you, Jacob. Would you like to go and ask your question, please?
So when it comes to technology, what kind of programs and hardware do you use when creating and developing animation?
Well, we are currently at Disney Animation. We're working on a software called Maya, which everyone has. You can purchase at home, or there are student editions that are for free, Autodesk Maya. And some studios will use what they call proprietary software, which is software that they build within the studio that you can't really purchase out in the real world. But since the pandemic, I am here at home, so this is my Disney office, and they gave us computers to work directly with our work computers from home. So we are connecting over a VPN through our network to theirs. But computer animation is a very specific set of tools, but the application of the ideas of animation should apply whether you're doing computer animation or pencil animation, and that's almost free, pencil and paper. So I feel like even if money is an issue, you can still pursue animation, pursue art, and pursue design in a way that will influence your animation. For instance, when we're animating, we have people like on our current film, Encanto, one of the directors is Byron Howard, who is an incredible traditional animator on paper. And so we'll show our animation to him. And there's a software that Disney's built that will overlay like a white sheet of paper over it, and he can draw digitally on top of our poses and say something a little bit more like this that helps communicate the idea better. And so even within computer animation, drawing is so important. So I would say that the software that we use is always changing and always growing, but the principles of animation are constant. And so you want to try to pursue knowledge about the principles, and the studios will teach you the software for sure by the time you get there.
Yeah,
awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jacob. One thing, Michael, if I could just follow up a little bit on Jacob's question. You talked a little bit there about the software that Disney's built to overlay onto a white background. Could you explain how that works a little bit to us, please?
So whenever we show our directors, it's in a meeting called Dailies, and in Dailies, they'll look at a movie file of our animation. So it'll just be like 8 seconds of Anna running and then looking over her shoulder, and then it starts over again. She runs and looks over her shoulder. And that whole time, the directors are thinking, like, is this the right expression when she's looking over her shoulder? And what about when she's running? Does that feel mechanically real? So they'll stop on a pose, they'll pause the animation, and then hit a button, and that will like overlay like a white transparency over the video. So that allows them to draw on a screen on a Cintiq, which is like a computer monitor that allows you to use a pen, and it'll allow them to do drawings on top of it. So the animator will have a drawing of what the director intended, and then you can sort of take that back to your desk and sort of try to make Anna fit that pose that feels a little bit more consistent with the storytelling of the film. It's very useful to get a direct line from the director if they're capable of drawing, or a lot of times we have other traditional animators who work at the studio who are great at giving us art like that. But it is, I think that's what makes Disney so unique and so special, is that it's still based on the fundamentals of drawing and design. And because of tools like that, we're able to continue it forward.
Lovely, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next question, which is going to be from Bethan Crotty. So Bethan, in a second, if you're able to turn on your camera and microphone and ask your question. Bethan, are you ready?
Hi.
Thank you, Bethan.
My question is it difficult to give the animations human characteristics, especially those that aren't human?
I feel like those are the most fun. Sometimes when a character is human, because as humans, we're trained to look at humans all day, right? Even digitally, even over Zoom, we're still looking at people. So we have a really good understanding of what people do. But when you're animating something that's sort of fantasy-like, it lets you explore how would this move if it were a person. I always think of Beauty and the Beast. We had Lumiere up in that photo. But I feel like it would be so much fun to think about like how Mrs. Potts moves differently than Chip. You know, she's an older woman. She has like a certain air of propriety around her, where Chip is just like a little, where I want to go there. So it's fun to think about like how are they different. So I think having if you're the kind of person who's just always sort of like looking around and noticing your friends do funny things, or look at the way that person walks, that's a fun walk. Like that sort of stuff that's the kind of stuff we talk about at lunch in animation. Is like, look at that person walking, that's so cool. Like, where are they putting their weight? All those sorts of things that define specific human behavior, you can put in anything. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much, Bethan. We're going to move on to now a question from Willow. So Willow, if you're able to turn your camera and microphone on to ask your question. Willow, are you ready?
Yeah, hello.
Hi,
Thank
Willow.
you, Willow.
My question is, are there any animated films you particularly admire and wish you'd been able to work on?
There's always one that people talk about at Disney, which happened right before I got there, Tangled. Tangled for me is like, there are things that they're doing in computer animation through Tangled that I feel like I'm still trying to figure out today, that I'm still trying to put in my work. And that one really got my attention when I was after school, kind of still studying and still learning. And I was like, wow, Disney is doing something special. I need to get over there. And then I got there, and the man who was responsible for a lot of the charm of Tangled is Glenn Keane. And he's like, I'm going to go pursue other projects. So he's made a lot of great films outside of the studio. He recently directed a film called Over the Moon. And he just has an amazing charm. So I feel like that film has a lot of really magical moments between characters, and they feel really malleable in a way that computer animation is really difficult to do. So that for me is a really special film. Also, thinking back to traditional animation, when I was growing up, Aladdin for me was the movie. Like, if I watch that today, it still makes me want to be a Disney animator. It like fills me up with like the Disney magic. Like, can you imagine what it would be like to be a Disney animator, especially the genie? And working at Disney today is still Eric Goldberg, who animated the genie, and he's like the nicest, kindest, gentlest man in the world. He has so much knowledge, and he's always willing to share it. And so it helps that like I associate my favorite childhood movie with one of the most amazing grown-up real-life people in the world. So yeah, there's a lot that I draw inspiration from, but those two kind of mine first.
Lovely, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Willow. Our next question is from Kate Brayshaw. If Kate is able to turn herself with her microphone and camera, if possible, on to ask her question. Kate, are you ready?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Katie.
Hi. What characteristics do you need to succeed in animation, and how difficult would it be to break into the industry?
I would say you need patience. Animation is taking a single action or single moment and slowing it down to 24 frames per second. And even in computer animation, that's still very slow. That is, for instance, a single animator could work on a shot that's about 8 seconds long for about 2 weeks. So think about, if you're working 40 hours a week or whatever normal work week is, and spending all of that time focusing on like, when does the blink happen? And is this breath too much? And maybe the brows are, maybe they're more concerned and not as sad, asking all these kinds of questions. It takes an eye for detail, a ridiculous amount of patience, but also sort of a desire to find the truth in it, because I feel like we all want that moment where we're in the theaters and everyone around us is sort of reacting to something cool that we just animated on screen and they think it's real. I animated some things in Moana of one of the characters going through a difficult experience towards the end of their life. And for me, that was special because I was thinking of my own grandma, and being able to sit in the theater and feel the room kind of shift when they realized something was about to happen that's magical. But that took a lot of patience, a lot of time. And I feel like those sorts of skills are useful in a lot of arenas. It's not just, it's not like it would be wasted effort to learn to be more patient. If you don't end up becoming an animator, it's useful everywhere. But I do feel like patience and an eye for detail, especially it's important too to remember, like for my own journey, I graduated from college and 4 years later is when I got this job. And that can be seen as fast, but also like while you're living through 4 years, that's not fast at all. So you have to give yourself the time that it takes to learn the thing, and be patient with yourself, because you can always want it right now, and I need to be successful, and I see all these people succeeding. Why not me? But your patience that you're learning through animation can also apply to the patience that you're learning for your own journey. So give yourself the time that you need to learn the thing. It's a difficult thing to learn, but it's totally worth it and worth the wait.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I don't suppose you could expand a little bit on one of the points you made. You talked about patience and perhaps an 8-second clip taking 2 weeks to do. Could you expand on the process perhaps that goes into making some of these clips, and what goes into making these clips, and the team that you have that takes such amount of time?
We, at the beginning of a process, an animator will be issued a shot. So the issuing is the scene has already been created within the computer, and the cameras are set up, and the characters are sort of roughly placed, but they're sort of in T-pose, which is where their arms are straight out and they're not doing anything. And they're just sort of like placed there to say, generally, Anna is running and she looks over her shoulder. So we'll sit with the directors and ask them questions about the shot, like, does it need to be this length? And how is she feeling? And is she right-handed or left-handed? Does it matter what shoulder she looks over? Like, really meticulous questions. And the animator will take that information, go back to their desk, and rough it out really quickly. So we call that blocking. And what blocking means is that it's animation that is not totally smooth. So normally the animation you see in the movies is like this sort of thing. It sort of looks like snapshots. So it'll be like one pose here and then another pose here. And so this holds until this one would show up. And that's called stepped animation, where the different steps of the poses are sort of highlighted and they're timed out. So it looks like sometimes how these streams might look up if the internet isn't smooth, where like someone pauses for a second and they show up over here and then they show up over here. But we'll show that to the directors and say, does this make sense? Does this feel like the right kind of attitude? Because animation is an additive process, so it gets more complicated as time goes on. So we want to rough out something quickly and then show that to the directors. So quickly means probably 3 or 4 days of doing that sort of thing. And then once they approve that idea, generally, then we can go in and we call splining. So that's where we take all of the main poses and we just sort of figure out like, okay, well, how long is the fist up here? Are we going to keep it up there and then bring it down quickly, or that sort of thing? So we're sort of working out how we call them the in-betweens in these stepped poses work. And that could take a while. That's, this is the part where computer technology can only get better, because we're just constantly fighting the interpolation of all the keys. So even though it's a computer animation technique, it's still animated frame by frame because the computer doesn't really know exactly what to do with it. So once we'll do that, then we show a splining progress to the directors. And if they love it, then they say approved, and then we all clap. And then the animator goes back to their desk and does a step called polish, which is like all the little stuff that directors probably wouldn't really notice, but they would feel in the theater. So it's like, how is the hand squeezing here? And if we see it squeeze, like that sort of thing. It's really small, minute things, or like tiny little face tweaks. And once that is all said and done, we'll publish it out so that the next animation department, technical animation, which is the job I used to do, can take over, and they do all the hair and cloth simulation to add even more realism and believability to the characters.
Yeah, thank you. Really interesting. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask Sammy, who unfortunately their microphone doesn't work. So Sammy's going to start typing a question. Sammy, if you could start typing now. I've got one question from a student who has been unable to join us today, which is Maya. And the question from Maya was, who was your biggest inspiration and what about them inspired you?
That's a good question, Maya. My biggest inspiration is, that's hard. I'll say, I mean, I mentioned both of them before, and they're sort of for different reasons. I think Glenn Keane, who I mentioned before, he animated Ariel and Aladdin and The Beast and Tarzan, among others. And he just has a really great sense of sincere believability in his characters. You always see in their eyes their sense of wanting something better than what they have right now, and it never seems cheesy. It never seems like it's artificial. It's really authentic, and I feel like he has a great sense of the human condition and like how to put that in the drawing. Also, he's an incredible draftsman, so his drawings are so much fun to look at even before the final version in the film, the really rough drawings. Also, I love the fun that Eric Goldberg puts into his animation, the animator of the genie. He just has a sense of playfulness in his animation that I wish to get more of in my work still today, because he has such a solid understanding of what the principles of animation are and how to utilize them well. So he really builds in the joy into the work because he just understands the technical part of it so well. So the two of them together are like the perfect animator, and independently they're very nice people. I'll say that they're the best.
Lovely, thank you very much. A really interesting question from Maya. I think I've just seen that Sammy's question is now being put onto the typed into the chat. So we're from Sammy. How much has technology changed animation, and what do you envisage the future of animation to look like? That's a very tricky question. Thank you, Sammy. It's
a good question. I think that there are definitely developing techniques in animation that people are exploring now. For instance, I've seen a lot of VR recently that has only, I guess in the last couple of years, really picked up. And Disney recently did a VR short called Myth, based on some of the Frozen 2 ideas. And it's a different audience experience, right? You're sort of driving some of the story, you're set within the world, and it's fully immersive in a new way. I do think that the things that are consistent are the ones that will stand the test of time are about real story, real experiences that we can all relate to. Especially, I feel like it's even more important in VR for an experience to be somewhat relatable because you're set within the world. And if the world around you doesn't make sense, then it's going to be difficult to say, like, I want to experience that again. But I think as technology improves, storytelling is only becoming more important because the characters and the world are becoming closer and closer to the audience. And so we just need to make sure that our stories justify that kind of proximity. But I do think that VR is pretty exciting to see in the future. And as an animator, as someone who's actually doing the work, I also love seeing developments in the manipulation of the characters. Like the actual work that I do is like putting the arm up here and putting the arm, like placing the head here. If you think about the way that we animate, I don't think I have anything around me like it, but they're like little dolls, like little action figures. And so the way that you like pose out a character, but it's like as if you can only move one thing at a time. And so if you want to move the hand here, but then you move the chest, that could move the hand. So you have to like do the hand differently. So it's just a lot of like managing of different movement to try to get the character move around. And there are a lot of tools that are happening in some Disney initiatives where they're trying to improve some of the movement of the characters within the virtual space. So it'll actually make the job of animating easier and maybe a little faster, so you can try out different ideas more quickly. So those are the things that excite me. The second one's kind of geeky because it's sort of like, internal, but I do feel like that VR storytelling is going to be more and more important, and it'll be exciting to see which ones kind of rise above.
Thank you very much. Really interesting question from Sammy. One more question from a student who was unable to attend, one of our Year 13 students, Keris, and she wanted to ask, do you ever work in other art firms away from animation, and what transferable skills has working in animation given you?
That's a good question. Sometimes when you're in the computer so much, especially during Zoom times where like all of our meetings are happening digitally now, I just want to like turn all the screens off and go do something tactile. So I love doing watercolors because again, they sort of force you to be patient. I don't know if anyone here has watercolored and tried to rush one, it's not going to work. You have to wait for things to dry and sort of think about things and slow down a bit. So I really appreciate watercoloring. I'm starting to get into writing. I feel like animation being in Disney and being surrounded by such great artists in every discipline has taught me a lot about storytelling. And it's funny that like outside of animation, my interests are things that are opposite of animation, because my work is so you put everything into it while you're working on animation that it's just fun to try different things. So if you think for 2 weeks I'm going to work on 8 seconds, writing is different. Writing is like for 6 months I'm going to work on a full thing. So it feels like it's it just exercises a different part of your brain. So yeah, I think those two things are the things that are currently interesting. If you ask me tomorrow, it'll be a different thing. I think that's sort of the life of an animator, is always trying different stuff. So yeah, it all feeds into it.
Lovely, and thank you, Keris, for that question. I've seen Jessica is here, so our next question is from Jessica Mallard. Would Jessica be able to turn her microphone on and her camera if possible and ask your question?
Hi, what advice would you give someone pursuing a career in art?
I think that the most important thing that someone can focus on if you're pursuing an art career is that the success of the career isn't necessarily the same as other careers. When you're trying to be an artist, there really is no like I made it, right? Like if you want to be working towards a law degree or anything business related, there are sort of like ladders to success or to made itness. And in art, there honestly isn't really that many top tier kind of jobs, and even people who are within the top tiers feel like, oh, I have somewhere else to go, because art is an internal drive to search for truth and to search for your vision of truth, or even your aspirations for how the truth could affect the world. And so it's sort of, I keep thinking of, there's one of the 9 Old Men, real quick, the 9 Old Men were like Walt Disney's go-to animators back in like Pinocchio all the way through Jungle Book, even later. So one of them, I think they were asked towards the end of their career, what was their favorite thing they ever worked on? And, they had worked on like Hook and just all sorts of characters that have defined our childhood. And they're like, well, I did a Mickey drawing that I liked once. Oh my goodness, you liked one drawing. But I think that just goes to striving for. And so I think you just sort of have to be okay with the thought of, I still have somewhere to go. And I think for animators and for artists, that's exciting, because none of us want to stagnate. We all want to keep pursuing and pushing. And so people are constantly trying to find a new thing. That's why I said tomorrow I might have a different answer for what my outside interests are. So I feel like if you're pursuing a career in art, you just have to like enjoy the experience. There is work out there, obviously, especially even probably more now than ever. And so your parents don't need to be scared. There is work to be found. But what's nice is that your drive to be an artist will always pursue you forward to be a better one, and that'll only offer more career opportunities. So while other professions have a more sturdy, concrete structure of progression, one doesn't exist for art. It's just a little more amorphous, so people kind of move in and out, creating things. So it's a little scarier, but I think it's fun, and I think my parents are happy. So I'll say on that end. It's a good question now.
Lovely, thank you very much, and thank you, Jessica. We've got a question submitted by Marcus now, and the question Marcus wanted to ask was, is it preferable to practice digital art as opposed to traditional art in order to get into animation?
There really is no, I don't think there's a preference. When people submit portfolios to Disney, and a portfolio is a collection of work that shows this is what I can do currently, and this is why I think I would be good for your studio. Very rarely do people wonder if it was done digitally or traditionally, especially as the digital tools become more and more sneakily traditional looking. So I feel like probably in the studio space, they're going to want you to work digitally just because it's quicker, and studios move at a really fast pace once a production gets going. So I think it's been a while since people have, for instance, done storyboards traditionally. Storyboards are like the quick sketches that happen before it gets into animation to say, this is the idea of the characters. And if you look at like Toy Story, the original Toy Story, those are all done with hand, paper and colored pencils. But once you get later, they're done more digitally through different digital programs. So I think a lot of studios have their own internal programs, but similar to the ones that are out there, like Photoshop or a drawing app on the iPad, Procreate. Those are really great tools to learn how to draw digitally. But I do think really what matters is the application of the principles that you're learning. So if you have a really great technique to make watercolor look right, but it doesn't mean anything because the knowledge of art in your brain doesn't really transfer to your hand, whether or not it's digital or watercolor, that'll be the note, really, is to take classes to understand the tool, regardless of whether it's digital or watercolor.
Lovely, thank you, and thank you, Marcus, for that question. We're going to go to Hattie now, who hopefully can unmute and turn her camera on to ask her question. Hattie, are you ready?
Yeah, one sec. I think that's what. Yeah, it's worked.
Hello.
Hi. First of all, I just want to say I think it's really cool everything that you do. And this has actually so far been really, really interesting. So thank you for talking to us all. But my question is, what characters taken the longest to animate, and did you face any problems in the animation process?
That's you're getting into some territory there, because we're animators, like I said, we're always striving to be better, and so we're very aware of where we have shortcomings because we want to improve. I feel like I animated a lot of Moana, like the character of Moana, and she was my favorite, and I had the hardest time animating her. There's a certain shot in the film that I cringe every time I see it. I'm not going to tell you when it happens, but it's just a moment where I feel like, oh, I could have done so much better making her feel. This feels like an artificial moment, and it had so much potential to be stronger, and so that propelled me in the next shots of her later to do more compelling work. But yeah, I really felt like I owed it to Moana, the character, the person, to do that well. And during the making of that film, one of the cool things about Disney is they constantly have people coming in to tell you, like, this is cool, like what you're doing is awesome, and this is why it's important. And so we had people from all over the Pacific Islands, including Ali Cravajo, who's the voice of Moana, coming in and talking to us directly. And she's like, this is important for these reasons. And so we had a very clear understanding as like, the people of the Pacific Islands need to be represented well, and it's our job to do that in a way that honors them and helps them feel authentic. And the more authentic you animate a character, the more universal the appeal is anyway. So it's in your best interest to make something feel specific and unique. And so that's why in that moment, which I again will not tell you about, I feel like I could have done a better job making her feel more unique. So yeah, it's always the ones that are the most difficult, that are the most rewarding, because you're trying the hardest to do it well. So in the end, I look back at Moana as probably one of my favorite experiences, not in the least of which because I got to share a shot with Eric Goldberg, animator of the Genie. He animated the Minnie Maui character, and Maui had just thrown Moana off a boat, and then Minnie Maui was going to be like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And then Maui like does a little peck bounce, and that knocks over. So I got to like collaborate with Eric Goldberg, who was drawing the Minnie Maui part. And he's like, "What do you want to do here?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. You animated, you can do whatever you want to do. You animated the Genie." And he's like, "No, why don't we try this?" So we were working together. So anyway, I look back at Moana really, really fondly.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Harriet. Our last question from a student comes from Elise, and she asks, what is a typical day like as an animator for a company like Disney?
Well, currently it's like going to the other bedroom and animating on an iMac. But really it's, someone posted up a picture today we have like an animation department Slack channel. And I guess a year ago today was our holiday party. And so we have like a gift exchange where everyone in the department buys a gift, and then we just sort of open them randomly and people steal from each other. It's a lot of fun. My memories of working at the studio in the building with everyone are mostly about running into people in the hallways and grabbing coffee with somebody and building relationships with them and showing them my work and saying, why isn't this working? Because it's a really vulnerable position being an animator, because you sort of are like finding your own personal truth to put into the character and then saying, does this make sense to anybody? And then people are in a room saying, yeah, I don't really know if I buy this. And you're like, that's me. I don't know if you buy me. And so you're putting yourself into your work, and you really want to feel seen. So it's a lot of really close relationships with coworkers, probably closer than most, because we're all striving to build something together. But in terms of the logistics of the day, start of the day, there's always coffee in the morning immediately. And then we'll animate for a bit and then go to lunch, talk about things that we're working on. I love taking breaks from my work where I'll just go walk around. The Disney Animation Studios is across the street from the main Disney lot. So I don't know if you've seen the movie Saving Mr. Banks, but it was filmed on that lot. And it's a gorgeous place to just walk around. And so every afternoon I'll get so deep in my 8 seconds of animation and be like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I don't know what I'm looking at. So you just get up, walk around the studio lot, and realize like I work at Disney Animation. And then you come back just pumped to finish your work, and then you go home. So it's a fun time to build. Cannot wait to get back into that building so that we can all sort of work together and feed off each other's energy. So it's amazing. I don't know if everyone was able to see, but the upcoming film Ryan Dragon was animated almost totally at home, which is wild. I don't know what the plan is for our current film. It feels like it might be something similar depending on how this shakes out. But the fact that it looks the way that it does and it was animated at home is like a testament to the people that work in the studio as ones who, regardless of the building that they're in or the people that they're around, they're still to do an awesome, never before seen thing. And it's cool. It's just cool to be a part of that group of people. So to be around them again is something I'm really looking forward to, because that'll help motivate all of us, I think, to be even better.
Lovely, thank you. Can I just pick up on one or two things you mentioned, which we found really interesting? How has the animation industry been affected by the changes that we've all encountered with COVID-19? Obviously, the arts industries, both here and in America, have been quite severely hit. Is animation in the same area, or are you able to work from home a lot? So the animation industry is kind of managing to adapt?
It's been amazing how adaptable animation has shown itself to be. I think the heroes of our studio, people were saying that, like, when the credits are made for Ryan the Last Dragon, there should be a specific full-page credit to thank the technology department. I don't know if they're doing that, but it was just as grateful as everyone is in the studio to have a job. It's only because of the people in the technology department who made it happen. And so recently we had a company update, and there was just an endless supply of things that we had worked on this year. It was a huge year for Disney Animation in terms of things that we made, things that we're planning on making. One of the biggest ever, and I've been here for 8 years, so at least in those last 8 years, like, it was an exhaustive list of accomplishments for a year, and it was just amazing to think that even, especially this year, to have accomplished that. So I think all of that goes to our technology department for building an infrastructure that can support 800 families at home, all working on their network and keeping it afloat. It's amazing. So yeah, I think as hard as the industry has been hit, the film industry in particular, and television, animation has been able to sustain from home, because we're sort of, our characters don't have to actually touch. We sort of manage that digitally, so they're not going to get sick. They'll be fine.
Lovely, thank you very much. And what I'd like to do, just before we finish, is draw together some of the things that you've mentioned together in one place. So I've written down here some of your quotes. You talk about real story and real experience. You talked about how rewarding it was to affect an audience's emotion with your animation. You mentioned storytelling and authentic and truth. Do you think that's the key focus or the key message, or your key aim with your animation, is to get that kind of element of storytelling and emotion and experience across to the audience?
I think that comes from the sincerity. So if you have ever seen behind the scenes features of animation, there's always video reference that animators are filming themselves in a small room where they'll just like act out a thing just to feel and understand what the character's doing, similar to the vocal lessons, the singing lessons that we were taking. And in doing that, that helps personalize the action that you're tasked with animating. And I think especially at Disney, where these films are worldwide, the anticipation of their release is huge, bigger than most films in the world, just because of the legacy of Disney Animation, what we've all come to trust and believe in. And so you feel this sense of pressure to, like, I have to do justice to that. And in being trusted with a moment of Moana, like there's the famous "I am Moana" line from the song. And for about 2 minutes, I was Moana, but nobody knows that. I don't look at all like her, but I feel like I have a sort of a responsibility to be the right kind of Moana for the world. And so that comes from sincerity, from observation of the world around me, and trying to filter through all of that information to say, like, what is the truth of this moment, and how do I physically portray that through the pose of my character, through her facial expressions, and maybe through what I can interpret as her internal thought process through what we see in her eyes, because everyone's going to be looking at the character's eyes. So that's where most of the information we try to put lies.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And from me, can I say thank you very much for joining us here? I know we're different with the time difference. So it's been a real pleasure for us to have you here. I don't know if Mr. Shaw is still here and would want to say a thank you.
That's great. Should we pause the record there? Is that best?
Yeah, let me just 1 second.